What up? What up, everybody? Thank you guys for checking out, for those of you that got a chance to watch it, the latest video essay, We Don't Need Another Hero. I also want to say a big fat shout out to my younger brother. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Miles, brother. Happy birthday to you.
Yeah, he is he should be 30. We're 9 years apart. 36.
Well, that's all right. That's what's up. Peace and greetings to the chat. Peace and greetings to the audience. Peace and greetings, Jason Miles. What's up? What's up? What's up? What's up?
M Tucson says Mason Miles. No, my younger brother is not named Mason. For reasons Pascal understands, I will not say his name on air.
Oh, nah, don't do that. And I already know why.
Yeah, won't say his name on air. But happy birthday. I hope you're watching. And I will send you a message later. I hope all is well with you up where you are.
For real, for real. Pascal has been continuing with his diet of eating oatmeal for breakfast, fruit for lunch, and salmon and salad for dinner, and fruit intermittently in between, and occasionally a tuna sandwich from Subway.
You can tell Pascal is losing weight because there is a glow in his face.
And the fruit is making Pascal visit the bathroom quite often.
And yes, I'm wearing my Bronco hat because I have to continue the celebration of hopefully our next Super Bowl victory. But food be damned. Let's talk a little bit about I'm sure a little bit of that video triggered Pascal. It triggered the shit out of me making it.
Oh, man, let me tell you something. Basically, that video was the timeline to my young adult life up until my adulthood without the fun music and enjoyable parts. And Tucker Carlson was the most annoying and triggering part, even more so than George W. Bush. I only wish you really could have. It wouldn't have been relevant. I wish you could have included more of the 70s, but it wasn't relevant.
It wasn't relevant, and I will tell you, but there were some things that I wanted to include because initially, and Pascal knows probably more than anyone, than some other people that are, very personal to me, that this has been something I've been working on for some time. As we're changing the format of the shows constantly, we were doing these video essays about twice a month, and we're going to now reduce it down to once a month. So we're going to do them the second Wednesday of every month. We're going to do video essays now, and we'll have a recap show. And the recap show will always look differently. As you know, the Bill Cosby recap show was me, Teray, and Bertram. Hopefully I won't be the only one doing these video essays. I'll get a little help from some of the other cats in the crew, as I know Pascal has definitely several ideas.
I've got a few. I've got one on Duvalier, and I've got one I'm interested, based on that book that our brother William, I forgot his first name, we were talking about, that book on Haitian politics after U.S. occupation, 1934 to 1957. I've been thinking about that as well. Those two. I got three in my mind, actually. I just got to figure out the format. I think I can figure it out, but I do.
Somebody says something, and on these recap shows we're going to be a little more interactive, similar to what Pascal does on the Mau Mau Hour, except for the Mau Mau Hour he actually has a scripted thing he's Mau Mauing, if you will. Someone asked if the Michael Brooks clip at the end was kind of an example of false idol worship. It's complex. It is complex. I did put that. There's a lot of little things. I don't call them Easter eggs per se, but there's things that I do put in the video that I always look to see if people notice. Like, for example, I do cut things really quick sometimes, and sometimes I don't. So someone, I think it was Gigi, had commented, man, that mud wrestling scene, it felt forever. I'm like, yeah, I wanted a lot of things to be uncomfortable to watch because you're watching them through a different lens now, an overly politicized lens. So now these things that were fun at one point in time, I mean, keep in mind, there was multiple mud wrestling bars in the 80s. I want to say maybe up until the 90s in Los Angeles on the Hollywood Strip.
Not only that, don't forget the freaking urban cowboy popularity of the what do they call it? The electric horses. What do they call
I don't
those
even
things?
know what they're called. I call them John Travolta.
You know, it's really fascinating, right? One of the consequences of doing this show, um, and really one of the consequences of doing political writing for me, but really the combination of the both, is that in the current political moment of what we have deemed, shout out to guest Anton Jaeger, who came up with the term hyperpolitics. The period of hyperpolitics that really comes about after the rise of Bernie Sanders and Trump, and everybody's a socialist now, or young people at least. Everyone's a Marxist, everyone's a ML, everyone's a this, everyone's a that, right? Because both of us are older, and even though I'm a little older than you,
Mhm.
when I reflect on the sheer political destitution that existed in the 80s and 90s and the millennium, as much as I had fun and enjoyed the 80s and the 90s and whatever, right? I love the music of the 70s. I even love some of the hip hop of the 80s and the 90s. I love a lot of the movies and pop culture all that time. And as fraught as the current moment is, I would not want to trade the current rise of socialist popularity in American consciousness for the good times and fun I had in those periods of post politics or anti politics.
Yeah.
To be absolutely quite honest, I, yeah, you know, I'm 53 years old, as Jason knows, and I started college in 1986. It's going to blow people's mind. I actually
When
told them my age.
almost when that video starts in 85 with Farrakhan
Right.
and Donahue, yeah.
Y'all got to remember, right? I pledged a fraternity in 1987 as a freshman. Most of the guys who mentored me in college are guys who right now are in their late 50s, in their early 60s, right? So for me, as old as some people think I am, when I was in college, up until maybe my junior year, I was always like the youngest guy in the crew. And one of the reasons it's hard for when people call me like, oh, you're the gray beard, you're the old man, is that in my formative teenage years, I was always being mentored by guys who were like 4, 5, 3, 5, 6, 7 years older than I was, right? And one of the reasons why that had a significant impact on my life is I'm the oldest son in my family. I never had an older brother. So I benefited from having all of these older big brothers. But one thing that I realized in dealing with them now, most of them have profoundly reactionary, shitty pro-black politics that don't challenge capitalism, that don't challenge class, and don't really challenge empire significantly, but still are considered quote unquote down or deep brothers because they posture pro-black.
I mean, again, back to the whole, double meaning of a lot of the clips that are in there. I started that whole thing off with Farrakhan for a very specific reason, because to this day, Farrakhan in the wide range of the black community is looked at as like kind of the definition of woke or pro-black or kind of a positive figure, mainly because a lot of us have friends or family that have gone maybe in the carceral system, and some have come out in the Nation of Islam, and there's sometimes a positive aspect to that turnaround. So I remember very vividly the Million Man March.
I went to the Million Man March.
There you go. I mean, it was a big deal.
I mean, let me tell y'all something. Like, there was a period up until the contemporary moment on the East Coast. Obviously, we couldn't do that for West Coast brothers because it's a whole so far away. If you were from like the Northeast and people asked you if you went to the Million Man March and you said no, like, you legitimately like lost credibility with a lot of folks.
Mm-hmm.
Folks legit, we were like, you didn't go to the march? What? It wasn't until, let me tell you something. There was one thing I read. Shout out to Adolph Reed. There was one thing I read in class notes that when I read that shit about the Million Man March, the whole significance of that march just went. Adolph Reed has a line in class notes where he said, I don't think in any other time in history we've seen 1 million men come together to protest themselves.
There's a lot of black right-wingers that were at the Million Man March that use that as a sign of validity of their blackness. Like, I was at the Million Man March. Ergo, that is why I say these. That's why I'm so entrenched in this pull up your pants rhetoric. But I was also very close. I was very, very close. Very, 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 very close to cutting in a joke clip that a show that I was a fan of back in the 90s called Mr. Show did, where they were mocking that episode of Donahue where Farrakhan is defending some really horrible comments that he had made, calling Hitler a great person. And I forget what else he said. I can't think off the top of my head. He said some other things. I was just like, what the fuck did you just say? And the way he defends himself, I thought it was hilarious.
I mean, the thing is so interesting to me about Calypso Louis and his popularity is that, Calypso, first of all, let me tell you right now, right? I mean, like, I'm not a Farrakhanist. Yes, I'm a Muslim. I've never been a member of the NOI, right? Farrakhan is problematic, right? But I'll be very candid. I'll be transparent. And please, people listen. I find Farrakhan kind of funny. Kind of funny, like, I look at Farrakhan, and please, people forgive me. I look at Louis Farrakhan as a Caribbean man.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was born in America, but he's a child of the Caribbean. And I've heard Farrakhan speak with a Caribbean accent. I actually can show you YouTubes of Farrakhan singing Calypso music.
A while back, we
while back, right?
Yeah.
But like, Farrakhan is kind of like a very kind of conservative Caribbean dude, okay? And there's a lot of very conservative Caribbean dudes. And I find that if people really understood how much of a Caribbean Farrakhan really is, it would explain his politics and worldview a lot more than the Black nationalist stuff in some ways. Because he's got some of that pull up your pants, clean up, get your haircut, Negro, old school Caribbean shit that my father's generation had a lot of.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a lot of that. I'm not down with the anti-Semitic stuff. I think, Negroes with Jews on the brain really get on my nerves. Shout out to Anthony Weir. Shout out to my man Anthony Weir. Anthony Weir gave me 2 quotes that I've used that Jason has ascribed to me. One of them is Black power succeeded culturally where it failed politically. That's Anthony Weir. And Anthony Ware has a word for people who he thinks are anti-Semitic or focus too much on Jews, particularly black people who focus too much on Jews. He says that they have Jews on the brain. He was like, these niggas have Jews on the brain.
Oh, I mean, if you watch that entire Donahue episode, and there's twofold reason why I do that. Number one, I kind of want to show what the first wave of daytime talk looked like. And there's a line that Geraldo has that is cut out of the video I put up in a documentary he was in, I want to say in the 90s, where he says he's talking about what daytime talk shows replaced for the most part. And one thing they replaced was there was even more game shows that came on during the day. There's even more soap operas that came on during the day. And a lot of the first wave of people that you see, Geraldo, Phil Donahue, Maury Povich, Sally Jesse Raphael, Oprah Winfrey, who came a little later, these people all came from newsrooms and journalism. Geraldo, breaks onto the scene, breaking a story that shuts down an insane asylum in upstate New York that they actually base scene for scene what he had done. If you watch the American Horror Story series, season 2, towards the end of it, it's a scene for scene remake of his news reporting of an insane asylum in upstate New York that got shut down. I can't think of the name of it right now. So there was a seriousness to what they were discussing. And one of the things that got really, really common in what they were talking about was the rise of, they didn't use necessarily white supremacy or alt-right, but there was a rise of this neo-Nazi movement. And if you watched enough talk shows, you really thought that it was a huge, huge problem, maybe bigger than it actually was. But it also made for great TV because there were instant fights. We don't have the left that we have today. So you had black nationalists like Roy Ennis. There's a reason why he's on quite a few of these shows. You have the pimps like Al Sharpton, who definitely came out whenever there was any sort of racial grievance. And New York in the 80s, especially the mid 80s, when these shows are really popping off, had some serious fucking problems. There were economic problems to start with, but all you heard about was just the racial problems. So we're always hearing about these problems as if they just appear out of nowhere. And it's just hatred be damned. Well, post the fall of the Soviet Union, those shows aren't as popular. And the enemy seems to be, even just the thing to talk about seems to be ourselves. And now we just make fun of poor people. Those shows went from constantly having racial strife be the centerpiece to let's trot out some poor people and make fun of them. Do you remember that time, Pascal?
No, absolutely. Because what really happens, right, is that in the 90s, with the rise of Bill Clinton, black politics really absorbs neoliberalism. Because as we talked about in a prior show, right, Bill Clinton is the first baby boomer president. And because Clinton is the first baby boomer president, he is treated with profound suspicion by the right wing that had won 3 prior presidential elections, as Jason eloquently explains in his video, that after 12 years of reactionary right wing presidents, that we get Clinton. So there is a right wing blowback to the election of Clinton because black people politically were so worried about the rise of Newt Gingrich, the reactionary right, the contract with America. Some people call it the contract on America. And Clinton was the first Democrat they had seen since Jimmy Carter. There was literally a coalescing around Bill Clinton, around his rather horrifically terrible neoliberal politics, because pretty much by that time, we had already had 2 decades of the black political class. And and the black urban regimes that had been popular in the 70s and 80s. And I implore our readers and our audience to go check out Adolph Reed's Errol Reed's book, Stirrings in the Jug, where he discusses the politics of the black urban regimes in the period of neoliberalism. A lot of you guys are very young. You guys would believe that having a black mayor in Jackson, Mississippi, or Birmingham, Alabama, or Atlanta, or these places is like, oh, this is a big deal. When Jason and I was coming up, major cities in America all had black mayors. LA had a black mayor. Chicago had a black mayor. Yeah. New York had a black mayor. DC had a black mayor. All right. So part of the sad consequence of the post-Obama black political class is that with the rise of the millennial political hyperpolitics, there's an assumption that these young people are reinventing a wheel that was already there.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was another reason for doing the essay. I mean, there's a lot of things that were on my mind that I felt were replaying. I definitely, and people may disagree with me, but I definitely feel like watching Jerry Springer was like watching a Twitter timeline.
Yeah.
And we didn't say things like cancel culture because it didn't really exist, because you can go back to your town and maybe people don't watch the episode you're on, or maybe they watch and they forget about it, soon after, or maybe you made it up to get on the show, who knows? But, I didn't put it in, but I don't know if people remember what those shows were like. Donahue kind of starts it off with going around the audience and getting audience participation. And if people got a little too much with it, he'd push back on them. Oprah did the same thing. Geraldo, for the most part, did the same thing, because that wasn't polite conversation.
Let me tell you, can I interject briefly? Please
Sure.
forgive me. Sure. Let me tell you something. I regret the rise of Oprah Winfrey as a talk show personality in that era. You know why? Phil Donahue had a damn good TV show.
Yeah. Yeah.
Phil Donahue had a very cerebral talk show in that era. I'd like you guys, if you can, I know Jason remembers this because we've talked about it a million times. The episode of Phil Donahue where he has the panel discussion with Sister Soldier, Cornel West,
I put it. Yeah, we watched it. Remember, we watched it.
We watched it. First time you were on the show. And Daruba bin Wahad, who was a guest on our show. They had one of the most intense conversations about race, class, and black identity on Phil Donahue that I had ever seen, even on Black Affairs TV shows.
There's a hell of a panel he put together for that time frame.
Yeah, that was like early 90s, late 80s, early 90s.
And let's keep in mind, Phil Donahue finds himself booted out of media because he's anti-war, working for, was it MSNBC?
Yep.
So, there's something to be said about the first wave of these people. Of course, they are about ratings, but I really see it as a huge paradigm shift when Morton Downey Jr. steps on the scene. First of all, because his show played at night. That was a big change. And because it played at night, it was more raucous. Now, it did deal with things from a political perspective. It wasn't just, inbred love affairs and shit like that. It definitely was the goings on of New York, where I think he was out of New Jersey, out of Secaucus, but Secaucus might as well be New York. That's literally where you go park your tour bus when you play New York City in Secaucus. He's to the right of people like Ron Paul. And there was too much Morton Downey Jr. gold for the show. He was a huge fan of, what's that guy's name? Curtis Silva. Am I saying his name right?
Curtis Silva, yep.
So let's see what the Guardian Angels guy was always on the show. He definitely would have like
right-wing vigilante.
Police chiefs on the show and shit like that. He would let people speak, but it definitely was very different. He would antagonize the crowd. So it would be a constant yelling match. So if anyone could be a stereotypical New Yorker, no one could do it better than Morton Downey Jr. But
he channeled all the reactionary politics of New York City white ethnics of that period.
Yeah. And he had a very young fan base. A very young fan base. So what's interesting, there's people in our milieu that remind me of him now. I will definitely be quiet on names that have very large platforms that to me just look like they're reiterating Morton Downey Jr. Talking points and think they're leftists. I find that rather amusing.
Wow, but, that's a fascinating accusation. You think there are people who are as reactionary as Morton Downey Jr. who posture left in left media? Who are bred to people?
I mean, whatever you want to call it. I don't know what you fucking call it. Yeah.
In the podcast YouTube sphere? I'm only thinking of one, but I don't even think he would call himself left anymore.
Whatever. Did Morton Downey Jr., I never remember him saying where he politically lied because it wasn't important in this era. That's another thing that's like really important to talk about.
There was no left. No one cared about left.
Nobody cared about left and right wing. It just really wasn't a thing. And maybe you guys, to do these things, there's a lot of research that has to go into why. Because one thing I wanted to know was why. Like, why? We always talk about the right wing having money. That's true. But why is reactionary right wing media so large? And that really happens after the fairness doctrine is canceled in 87. Because what the fairness doctrine says is if you're going to have Bill O'Reilly's show, you don't just need a guest on his show to counter his narrative. You need another show. And it really wasn't cost effective because news isn't the commodity that it is today when it comes to selling ad time. Music sold ad time, not news.
Well, let me ask you a question, Jason. Sure. Do you really think that there was ever a time when media in America wasn't reactionary? Television music, television media.
I think it always had a spin. And definitely during the McCarthy years, that spin was to be very anti-communism.
Right.
I don't think anyone can really argue that. But even with being anti-communism, it was really hard to be anti-war, especially for the news people that actually went out there and saw the horrors of war and then saw what the horrors of war were bringing back to the States. So I think that made it kind of hard. And one thing, you know, again, I try to keep these things somewhat short and concise, and I am working on writing out a much longer piece with Touré Reed on this, and probably going to get into stuff like this. If you think about the way the Vietnam War was portrayed in the news media, and then you think about the way that Afghanistan and Iraq were portrayed in the news media, we kind of forget about those things after a while. We get a little burnout, and that definitely plays into the post or anti-politics of the aughts. You know, we get really, really energized with 9/11 because a lot of Americans don't know where the fuck Afghanistan is, don't know why anyone would want to blow up the Twin Towers. And for the most part, we were all shocked.
Let me tell you something, man. Let me tell you something that's very important that you're touching on here, right? I am old enough to remember that there was a time in America after Vietnam where most Americans thought it would be impossible to get Americans to go to war anywhere in the world again. It's going to be hard for a lot of younger people to realize this. It literally, in the 80s and 90s, there were people after Vietnam who are like, the chances of the United States going to war, we're not going to go to, who's going to go to war for what? That's not going to happen. I remember when Bush the father did the first Gulf War. People were shocked. They were like, we're going to go to war for a country that's where? What? And I was like, yo, we're going to war. People were kind of shocked. They're like, we're going to war. And then, of course, that lasted about a weekend. And then I realized, I was like, wow, Bush actually got America to go to war. And then after September 11th, another Bush took America to war, and we stayed in perpetual war for 21 years.
And part of reason why I played a long kind of clip of Bush Jr. talking was because one thing I wanted to show is even in talk shows, even when the Nazis were fighting the black nationalists, even when the two-timing cousin screwing person from the trailer park comes on Jerry Springer, there's a good guy and there's a bad guy. And that is the narrative in which we love to see the world. And if you want to talk about the problem with news, I wouldn't say news is reactionary, but US news has always given us the narrative of there's a good guy and there's a bad guy. And we don't really understand geopolitical interests, and we definitely don't understand empire. So
not only do we not understand, I mean, listen, man, Americans, first of all, I mean, I don't want, listen, I've been saying like Americans are ignorant. That's not fair, because you can't blame people for what they don't know. Americans are sadly very, very propaganda. Yes, you're straight. Grenada and Panama were true, but they were not really presented in the consciousness of the American people as real wars or major wars. So I don't disagree with that. That's true. But what I'm saying is that, and Korea was before my time, dude. What I'm saying is that America is a country that is very, very propagandized in terms of its understanding of the world around it, because we have, a somewhat not that great educational system. Most Americans don't even know the truth about their own American history. You expect them to know the history about what's going on in, Azerbaijan or Ukraine or Albania or all these places that they couldn't even find a map. And because Americans are very much propagandized to believe all of the rhetoric around liberty, justice, democracy, this is a great, I'm proud to be an American. It's going to be hard for many of them to have an oppositional view of how this system works, unless they are in a category of people who actually are adversely being affected by that history. I mean, for me, as not only a black man, but a black man whose ancestry is Haitian, it's easier for me to have an oppositional view of American politics because I've seen the brunt of the negative of it.
Mm-hmm. Hold on one second. Phoenix, you want to say hi to the people?
Hi.
You gonna tell them good night?
I'm gonna say hi.
Okay. Well, Daddy's gonna call you back. Okay. All right. Love you. Press red. Sorry, guys. My son, he knows that this is usually Daddy's night to not have a show, so I apologize. But I have to take that call.
That's more important than this show 5,000 times.
I see him once a month now, so that's kind of rough.
It's more important than this show 5,000 times. But what I was going to say is that Americans are very propagandized, right? And someone said it's very Afro-pessimist. By the way, we have lots of black people who don't have an oppositional view of American politics at all. I just said for me it was easy. And also the fact that, I have parents who have oppositional politics as well. We got lots of flag-waving I love America. And listen, man, I am not trying to tell people that they should hate America. That's not my place. All right? I'm not trying to turn you into a patriot either.
Yeah.
My aspiration is to give you a political education of the best honest rendition of America as a country, economic system, and empire, and in the sphere of the world of empires and nations, and have you manifest a politics that opposes exploitation and oppression best as possible. All right. I'm not interested in whether you love or hate America or you're a patriot or not. And I don't understand why we have people, regardless of their politics, who are so pressed on trying to tell other people what they should or shouldn't do in terms of their emotional feelings to a country. You know what I'm saying? But what all I aspire for is that if you do love America, be honest enough about how the country works to try to be able to fight to make it not only humane for its citizens, but humane for the rest of the world so that we don't have to engage in activities that cause harm domestically and abroad.
And another thing that I tried to fit, and it was just too much of a curveball, was the hero worship doesn't just happen from a presidential standpoint. And, that's also kind of a theme that runs through this as well, is that these talk show hosts sometimes become heroes, especially the second wave of hosts, because they're coming up in an era of anti-politics. So we're not really looking at leaders as heroes. No one, I mean, I don't know. I'm sure there was someone, but I don't know anyone that thought of Bush Sr. as a hero, or even really Bill Clinton. But definitely people had more takes about what was going on Springer or Ricky Lake than they probably did on, what was going on with Bill Clinton and in foreign policy. There was some video that went viral maybe 4 or 5 years ago with a judge in Rhode Island that was known, and maybe you know about this, Pascal. He actually had a public access show for years, and he was known for giving people like light sentences. And if like a dude had to go to court with his son because he didn't have a sitter, he'd let the son give the sentence to his dad. Like, what do you think your dad should have? Like $30 and a lollipop, like silly shit like that. And that guy was looked at as a bit of a hero or someone that's doing things right. And then there was another video that I actually had cut, and I had it in and I took it out, of a judge that had run into, I don't know if you remember, this has happened maybe 3 or 4 years ago as well. She ran into, she was arraigning someone, and she went to school with him. Do you remember that? I think it happened in New York.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, she was like, "Hey, did you go to such and such middle school?" And the guy goes, "Yeah."
I think that was in Florida.
I think it was in Florida. And it was interesting because people kept looking at these situations like, these are good people. This is why the system works, because we need good people in the system. And if we get good people in positions of power, then everything will work out. And the reason why I talked about Soviet art, there's a really good episode. It didn't get the views that I wished it would have gotten while Pascal and I were on vacation, where Kuba, I can't remember the professor's name, they did a show about Soviet era art.
I remember that show.
And when you look at the art from the Soviet era, it's definitely propaganda. But it's like this realist art that shows people doing mundane tasks, but it shows it so beautifully. And there's a lot to be said about that art, especially when you juxtapose it to American hero worship, because it's all in our art as well. And especially in the pop culture that we digest. So while you're seeing these paintings of the collective group of women majestically cutting wheat and shit like that, you got Captain America knocking out Nazis. And people have been asking about the Michael Brooks at the end of the thing. Is that some sort of ironic twist? Or it's definitely not a middle finger to the man whatsoever. It's definitely not a dig on the man whatsoever, because I think I believe the poor guy passed away too soon. I mean, I'm sure his family was believes that he's only like 36, I think, when he passed away. But there was a little bit of hero worship that happened with him, but I think people really appreciate it. And now I know I'm only going to speak for myself. What he brought to the arena politically, especially when it comes to political education. I mean, there's people on our show like Djene Bajalan who was in the Michael Brooks show universe. So it's not necessarily a dig, and I hope people don't see it as a dig because it wasn't meant to be a dig. Because I think,
why is there a question of whether it was a dig at all? I don't understand.
I think people, and this just happens when people die young. You know, I say this all the time. I don't think Jimi Hendrix would be remembered as fondly had he lived like Chuck Berry. I don't think Kurt Cobain would be remembered as fondly had he lived like Eddie Van Halen.
No one's clapping up Tears for Fears. I used to like them.
They're still around. They're actually going on tour right now.
I know. I saw them recently. My man, those boys look geriatric, boy.
That clip I think is an interesting, thought-provoking way that we should look at things. You know, we should understand power. We are idealistic in our vision. And sometimes we get lost in who can play in our club. And a lot of what I do is kind of reminding us that, you know, we have to stop some of the bickering and the sectarian fights.
Well, I mean, I think for me, right, and you know, I don't expect everyone to agree with me at all on many things, but I'm very remiss to say we, because I always ask, well, who's we?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? I think that those are things that I should work on. I can suggest on to people. If we're talking about all left, as I say, not to be, trite, we have leftists. We don't have a left. I don't see the left as a we. I see it as a bunch of people who have leftist politics. And I used to watch Michael Brooks. I enjoyed his show. I liked him. I like the show. I'll be very honest with you. He's one of the few of the young cats that came out of the Sanders coterie that I actually kind of liked and respected a little bit. Most of them, the other ones, I didn't really find remotely interesting, fascinating, or really kind of impressive. And I'll be honest with you, one of the reasons that I was inclined a bit more to Michael Brooks is that he was clearly more left and a little bit, I don't want to say radical because that's such a played out word. He was clearly more radical, particularly on foreign policy and international affairs, than any of those other cats that were coming out of that particular constellation. And then when I saw him have people like Milton Almaty on, I was like, oh, I know Milton. Milton's like a real cat. This is a cat I respect. I was like, okay, no problem. I don't think that he ever had Glenn Ford or Bruce Dixon on any of his shows. I would have appreciated having seen them interact. Sam Cedar had Glenn Ford on at one time, though. I do remember that. And I'm sure Michael would have done that. And I know Michael was very close with Adolf and Torre, which was cool. But again, I have been so used to seeing Adolf with a lot of other people in that sphere. But the thing that I found interesting about Michael Brooks was that he had very interesting takes on foreign policy issues in the global South and in the Black, Brown, and Latino world. And I'll be very honest with you. One of the reasons why I don't take many of the contemporary left, regardless of their color, seriously, is they're worthless on global South foreign policy. Most of them really don't have deep, they don't have deep interest of looking at global South foreign policy in a critical way that's sympathetic to the actual social dynamics. One of the reasons why I respect people like Vaughn is that Vaughn really tries to get that right. One of the reason why I respected Michael Brooks, he really, really tried to get that right. He really got that right, and it came through in his work, and I was like, okay, this cat is I can respect that.
He did a good job at making the left interesting, entertaining, and educational.
Now, I'll also say, though, he was very good at his craft. He was a very good left content creator. He was very, very kind and very generous. I think that his very kind and generous personality is what contributed to his success. Because, frankly, a lot of the left at that time were coming off like assholes to people. Quite a scale. I mean, there was a reason why they were being called the dirtbag left. People didn't like them. They were really considered obnoxious. And I'll be very honest with you, to give Michael Brooks his props. Michael Brooks was probably the only person that I saw that came out of that Sanders left constellation in that area that frankly didn't rub Black and brown and Latino people the wrong way. I'll be very honest with you. Like I've never heard anyone. Listen, I'm not trying to name these. I've heard complaints about a whole spectrum of bread to people from a variety of Black people on the left, Latino people on the left, not on the left, for a variety of reasons. Some not legitimate, some very legitimate. I had never heard critiques and antagonism in that light about Michael Brooks.
So again, it's a complex piecing in the end of the clip, and if it's going to make you talk about hero worship, that's fine. If it's going to make you talk about the work he did, that's fine. But if it's going to make you listen to the words he said at the end, remembering the Machiavellian Dr. King. We know the left is king, but the Machiavellian Dr. King that had a strategy, that had a plan, that understood power. That's a big thing that we talk about, especially me on this show, is understanding power. And, working in services and still having kind of, a hand in that world, especially in unhoused services, it makes you mad when people really have no understanding of power and everything is just simply idealism and who gets to play in my club. Because when you work in that world, you're not, and you're organizing and you're really out there, not just mobilizing for protest's sake, but actually literally trying to get things done. Like Dean said the other night, I just don't have time for the silly shit.
No, by the way, man, I really appreciated Dean on the show. Not only the show, the Champagne Room for me with Dean Robertson, man. I enjoyed that brother so much, really having that conversation on Black political thought and whatnot, and his opinions of the current moment. That's another brother I wish we could hear more from. But again, he just really, and I respect him. He's like, I don't have time for the BS. Like, there's too much BS. But the thing is, though, if no one makes time to address and neutralize the BS proliferates. The BS creates hashtags, and those hashtags become movements in the minds of people who don't know what a real movement is.
Well, there's, I talked about this on one of the last essays, not the Cosby one per se, but everyone's involved in an internet squabble or a hashtag. And we have to remember that there is a bit of and let's not downplay it like it's only for stupid people. There's a bit of a dopamine rush when someone likes something that you said. There's some validation to that. Like, let's not downplay that shit. There's a reason why we do want to comment on these things, because it feels good to have someone go, hey, that's all right. And if you look at a lot of the younger shows, not necessarily age-wise, but time they've been doing it wise, it feels like they don't put a lot of work into it, because that work isn't validated with likes and it took me weeks to get this thing done. There's nobody attaboying me
Well, I mean, I think that's very true, right? And one of the problem I have with a lot of the younger people, man, is that, and this is where I will give props. This is one thing I will give respect to, even the YouTube media podcast left, who are of the Michael Brooks, Bernie Sanders generation, not the newer, younger ones. I will say about the first generation, the older millennials over 35, that generation of cats, I will give them this. Though that first wave of the Bernie Sanders left, they did read and do scholarship and try to intellectually master the intellectual traditions of the left theory, left thought, regardless of whether I agree with their politics or not.
Mm-hmm.
Those young people were not ignorant of left theory, left history. And I'm going to be very, very frank, and I'm going to piss people off. I'll be very honest with you. One of the reasons why a lot of black and brown folk didn't like those people is those people knew black left history better than a lot of black leftists who were young knew. Not the people who educated me like Bruce and Glenn and Deruba, but a lot of these younger folks, even who were millennial or Generation X, who thought they knew left history. They didn't even know it as well as some of these white kids, and they resented being checked by them. That's a fact.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's a fact.
Is my picture quality really bad right now? People are making comments about my picture quality here. You're gonna see me. We'll get the real deal, Jason. There you go. Got white wall. It's, and I don't want to sound like I'm having a piss match about that bullshit. We have the theme on this show, and sometimes we can get a little off track, and I feel like we're back on track now. Behind the scenes, there's a lot we're doing.
There's a brother who asked a really good question. I don't. Please forgive me for interrupting you. This brother asked a really good question. I forgot the brother's name. I think his name is Ignacio. He said, "All I gotta do to be a right winger is to buy a gun and watch a YouTube. To be a leftist, I gotta get a PhD."
And the problem with that is because,
man, shout out to that brother, man.
I'm looking for the comment. If I find the comment, I'll put it up. I'm sorry, I can't find it. I didn't see it. But there's a lot to be said about that as far as the culture of authenticity. The whole punk rock thing I did was just using that as a way to talk about the left, the culture of authenticity and deconstruction. And I use what happened in that genre to kind of show, like, we're doing the same thing here. There's a lot of authenticity that doesn't allow new people in. And you have to build institutions that allow you to infiltrate the mainstream and not get co-opted by the mainstream. So you can't have, you're not going to get the dream politician that's going to win said election, and then, you get your socialist utopia.
Right.
Again, that's back to that whole, like, understanding power. So hero worship, not building institutions, holding institutions high when people do the quote unquote right thing. I mean, and it's not just these shows, if you watch, look, I love true crime to a fault. And if you watch, there's a newer series on Netflix about the Night Stalker, a guy named Richard Ramirez, who sadly did some. There's no word to describe what this man did up and down the West Coast for quite a few years. There's a part of it where the cop talks about beating up Richard Ramirez's cousin to get his name. Now, that's not legal. But they kept it in. I was so shocked that it made the final edit, because there's another scene where they talk about the main investigator who was nicknamed the Boogeyman in East LA, and they say it's because he would eat sunflower seeds. Like, nobody's calling him the fucking Boogeyman for that shit, because he busted heads. They edited that shit out. There's a lot of hidden propaganda in the shit that we watch, and maybe you guys don't watch it. Like,
it's not even hidden. Shit's not even hidden.
It kind of is, because Law and Order shows like that are one thing. Like, that's hitting you over the head with the propaganda drama. A documentary like that is about the system working for a bad person. There's another really hard watch about a little boy that is killed by his mother and stepfather, tortured. It's called The Trials of Gabriel Fernandez, I forget. Really, really hard watch. And that was kind of the impetus for this, because I was going to do a video essay around systems that we uphold. Because one thing about that show is, as much as it talks about the flaws in the system, it ends showing you, if you just do it right, the system works just fine. All the bad people got punished, and in the end, the system got fixed. Upholding these systems of oppression through the good people that enter me, a kind judge, a cop playing basketball with a kid in the hood. That's a problem, because when disruptors actually get into office, sometimes their whole time is spent protecting their time in office. I mean, Chesa Boudin is a great example in San Francisco. Here you have an open socialist district attorney whose dad was in the Weather Underground, who's only known as dad behind bars. And the first thing he does when he gets in office is he kicks out shitty cops and shitty people in the office that were protecting shitty cops. He's prosecuting law enforcement. If you hear the news talk about Chesa Boudin, it's only to say that he's a problem. And that news is probably going to be local news if you live in the Bay Area.
Wow. I want to address another question. The rich left uses leftist issues and politics as a pet project.
Sure.
The rich left. Interesting. I want to address the two things that were said here that was important. I want to address the brother who said that to be a right winger, all I have to do is buy a gun and watch Jordan Peterson, but to be a leftist, I have to have a PhD. You know why that is? Because the nature of being reactionary is that you don't have to change anything. Just say, I like it when it was better before today. So it requires no intellectual work.
Mm-hmm.
The definition of being reactionary is literally, I liked things before they changed. I want to go back and say why things were better then.
Mm-hmm.
That's the nature of being reactionary. You don't have to be intelligent to be a reactionary. Mm-hmm. Things were better and easier when blacks couldn't vote and we had Jim Crow. There was less crime.
Would you say that there's a bit of a reactionary nature even to, what we do here sometimes?
I think there's
not us particularly.
I think there's a reactive nature, not a reactionary nature.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a reactive nature, that we're reacting to phenomenon. I don't think it's possible. I think black people will say, "Oh, things were great when I was young," are full of crap. I don't believe that there are glory days in America for black people, or Latino people, or people of color, or women, for that matter.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to get back to the reactionary and indulge me when you say, it's the reason you don't have to be a PhD to be a right winger is that you can say it was better. The streets was cleaner. There was less crime. But you know what the reactionary is not going to tell you it was better in 1954 when the highest marginal tax rate was highest that it's ever been in America, and state capitalism was basically like China controlling all the private industry, and we had more regulation than anything before in the history of America because of the New Deal, and there was largesse that only allowed white men to compete in American capitalism that was subsidized by the government, damn it, and I'm a libertarian. He won't tell you that.
If I could do the wrestling sound effect, I would. I have to go through too many boards. Yeah, the PMC left and the SF is the worst, and people like Shahid Buttar ran up against it. But again, that's that understanding power phenomenon, and I'm not going to get into my opinions on that whole thing. That's a whole nother show. Shahid actually did hit me up recently about coming back on, and we just have to talk to the guys and figure out a day where we're going to get him back on. I think he's very a brilliant man. And I would definitely love to talk to him again. And I will be on Doug Lane's show. I'll be talking to Doug Lane tomorrow about the live show that we are putting together in Los Angeles. Or not Los Angeles, in Southern California. It's definitely not in LA.
Oh, that's what's up. When is that happening?
April.
Oh, wow.
The Sublation Media launch party.
Is it going to be an actual party, like with music and dancing and stuff?
Music and DJ and a debate between Trotsky and Stalin.
Interesting.
It is. I'll have more information. Doug and I had to talk some more about and Dylan Rodriguez. I got to hit up Dylan as well because he's going to be a part of this as well. It's going to be done in his neck of the woods, so it's going to be a good.
What town is that?
Most likely it's going to be in Riverside.
Word?
Yeah.
I can't promise to go, man. My weight loss depends on my status of my weight loss, man. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere until I lose the pounds I want to lose.
No, I feel you. I do want to address something. There's a few people that are on this chat that have known me for some time. Gogo Rivera, East Coaster, Jets fan, proud Jets fan, has known me for some time. And he hit me up as soon as the Russell Wilson trade. I'm very excited, bro. I haven't got a chance to hit you back. I'm very excited, brother, about the potential of my team. And we will be talking about it again this coming Monday on Beyond the Red Zone with me, Marcus, and Mac. And hopefully by the end of this week, I will have the show calendar up. Because another thing Pascal and I are doing this month, we already got the okay on it with Jeremy. Movie night at the end of this month. We'll be watching.
Movie night is going to be Perfecto Mundo.
If you're a patron, we're going to watch A Soldier Story. And like we did last time, we have a group discussion about the movie. And I got to see a lot of people's faces. I never get to see y'all. So that shit was fun. So I can't wait to see people.
We're going to do that through the Discord, I think, right?
Yeah, through Discord. So you got to be a patron.
Yeah, that's going to be awesome, man.
So I'm definitely excited for that. So there's some good stuff that we got planned for the show. Definitely, if you guys haven't done it, leave a comment, like it or hate it. I sadly read it all. Maybe I'm a glutton. Let me know what you thought about the essay, what you liked, what you didn't like. Tell me about your childhood or your younger years watching some of these talk shows. I definitely got to go down memory lane in cutting a lot of these clips. Another reason why this video took so long to come out. Morton Downey Jr. was my jam. So I watched probably 47 times Roy Ennis punk Al Sharpton.
I met Roy Ennis when I was in college.
Did he look mean?
He looked like an old school Caribbean cat, which means yes.
Slap the fire out of your ass.
Yeah, he had that same kind of energy as my father.
I cut it because he has a son. You went to school.
I went to college. He has two sons,
One
Niger
of his
Ennis
sons
and Kwame Ennis. I know both of them.
They're at the show where he pushes Sharpton. And apparently Sharpton was like, hey, I'm going to instigate this thing in Downey beforehand. And you see Al Sharpton look real shook. And if you pay close enough attention to that clip, Morton Downey, who is a third of the size of Al Sharpton, is holding him back. Because Al Sharpton wants no piece of what's going on. And you see Roy Ennis' son yelling at Morton Downey Jr. like, what the fuck is going on? This is your show. You're not supposed to let this happen. I had it in there and I took it. I was like, I was making the clip.
Well, Roy Ennis had tried to kick a couple people's ass on TV shows.
I do have an image of him choking out the Metzger kid, the son of I can't think of the main Metzger guy's name that was a white supremacist in Southern California, actually.
Roy Ennis was a hardcore black nationalist, came out of CORE, became a kind of right-wing Republican, as many black nationalists do. Roy Ennis is mentioned in Dean Robinson's book on black nationalism. There's a great clip on, if you go to Afro-Marxism, she has the clip of the black leaders in early 72 talking about the future of black America. And he was like, the black community is divided between a bunch of integrationists and nationalists. And some of them are a bunch of mixed race schizoids who are suffering from parental self-hatred because they do not know how to deal with their mixed race parentage. I was like, oh, this cat is off the chain.
So I didn't put this in the show, but I watched it. You know, if there's only been one person that's actually seen me put this stuff together, and that person definitely appreciates the hours of footage you have to watch. So there was a clip. Roy Ennis' organization is called CORE.
That's correct.
There was a white guy that was on the board or something of CORE that was on Morton Downey's show. And he was on to say that there was a problem with, I think it was Sharpton, this white guy, and it was an older black woman that she was a Republican, and she worked for the Reagan administration. And I think Bush's administration. And I can't remember her name. Maybe you know her. I can't, older black woman. And she, so this white guy is saying, I was radicalized as a progressive by Paul Robeson's wife because she told me, and I believed her, if you want to stop the evils of racism, progressive politics are the way to go. And he goes, and I believed her, and I think that's true. But the problem we face now is black racism. And it's black people killing white people. And he goes, I have the research that says that black people are killing white people at a higher rate than white people are killing black people. Ergo, the racism is reversed.
I think,
and he works for CORE. And so the black woman who literally just got off of Reagan's staff is like, I looked at your data, you cherry-picked numbers, and it's full of crap because violence in general is going down by 40%. And violence in these certain communities are going down by 40%. And then she says a line that I think really echoes the sentiment of black nationalism of that era and any sort of quote unquote progressive policies of that era, that the problem was, she says, is drugs. Simple and plain. She goes, it's drugs. And
middle-class white kids comes up to Harlem trying to buy some rock, tries to short the drug dealer. Motherfucker cracker, you trying to short me? Bow!
Reverse racism right there. So she didn't really get into the problems of the causation of poverty because it was just simply drugs and then, you know, broken homes, which was a through line they both kind of shared, which was it was this broken home problem. And in watching a lot of these older shows, and and doing a lot of reading, I need to start. And can someone remind me to start posting these articles? I was doing this way too early in the morning. I was working 2 something a.m. and I didn't want to hit Pascal up, but I didn't know so I got a JSTOR account, even though I think we
You
have
paid for a
access to
JSTOR
Gene's.
account?
Yeah, I pay for so we have one now. Anyway, there were some really good articles, so I'm going to start sharing them.
There's great stuff on JSTOR. What I'm saying is, I think they're giving a lot of them away for free though now.
Yeah, they weren't giving this one away for free. When you want to learn about deregulation in the 80s, you got to fucking pay for it. But I will be posting some of that stuff. If you guys want it, I'll post it on Patreon. And if you don't have Patreon or any money, if you send me a message on Twitter or Facebook, well, now Twitter, Facebook's private, I'll shoot you some of these articles. Really, really, really interesting stuff. So that being said, thank you, Pascal, for doing this show with me. It was going to be just me against the world. You decided to ride with me, and I appreciate that.
Someone had a zodiac question. What's the zodiac question? What's my sign? Is that the question? I'm a Sagittarius.
I would have told him, stop. Don't ask me no questions. Smoke, crack, and worship Satan. That is very, very true. Yeah, just remind me to post some of the research that I did for this. I'd love to hear some of you guys' takes on some of the stuff that I read. Keep a lookout for the longer form essay that's going to go a couple different extra ways that Teray and I are going to start working on soon. I've already started. And definitely always stay on the lookout for Pascal's work in Newsweek and Black Agenda Report. And there's other publications that have hit us up that are looking for his stuff. And I know he's working on some pieces right now. Are you not?
I am. I gotta grind them out. I got a few ideas. I have too many ideas on the mind. I'll be very honest, man. I feel like I've been doing a show every day for 2 weeks, and it's kind of like it burns you out.
That it does.
I feel like
somebody says, shout out. We are going to keep going on David Feldman's show as long as he keeps having us. It's been great for our show. I definitely I really think what he does with this community is a really special thing with his office hours and letting different people do different things. I've gotten a chance to watch some of the office hour stuff. I've actually made friends with Hannah Feldman, who's actually offered to help with some of the show production here. So getting to know the Feldman community is huge, and I definitely appreciate him lending a hand out.
Shout out to Feldman, Berman. By the way, Born in a Cold World, you just put a paragraph in there where I felt you described my whole life in one paragraph. I was like, is this somebody I know? He or she ran down like my whole life in one paragraph. I was like, how does this person know all this about me?
Yeah, this is funny. And also shout out to the Left Reckoning guys. I talked to David Griscom before we went on, and he reminded me that we were interfering with their time slot. So I apologize, David.
Oh wow.
he was fucking with me, man. He was fucking with me.
Because I said Mr. Feldman had me amped after I was on his show. I don't know why, but I felt like extra amped. And I felt like he was like psyching me up. He was like, yeah, Robert, the T is silent, but you're not.
He's an interesting cat, man. And shout out to Rodrigo for hooking that whole thing up. Yeah, and if you guys ever want to give me free access to sites with good academic articles, I'll take it. We collectively do a ton of reading and research work. Tomorrow, Kuba will be interviewing Maria Repnikova as Pascal and I take some time off.
Oh, word? Is that the plan?
Hell yeah.
Oh, that's what's up.
Yeah, you remember, Pascal, in the great words of Denzel Washington, this shit is chess. It's not checkers.
Word. And I play chess and I hate checkers.
So Maria Repnikova has a new book out called The Soft Power of China, and they will be discussing the soft power of China and China's role in what's happening with Russia and the Ukraine. So it will be a fun show. And for anyone that wants to complain about Kuba's microphone, I do want to tell this true story before we go. We've been getting shit about Kuba's mic since Kuba has come on the show over a year ago. It's been over a year. 2 weeks ago, Pascal, was Kuba's first appearance on the show.
2 weeks ago this year?
Yep.
Should we mourn right now or later?
So I purchased and Kuba does a lot for the show behind the scenes that people don't see. I purchased a interface and microphone for Kuba. I got a message that interface and microphone had arrived. And before we go on the air yesterday, maybe 10 minutes before, I get a message from Kuba, never came.
Yeah, that's some Canadian bullshit right there.
So if you just bear with us for another week, we will have the proper setup. I had sent the proper setup. It was so dope. So we are fixing this. I just want you to know it is not his fault. Literally, we were fixing it. It was fixed. And somewhere along the lines, there was some Amazon fuckery.
Yeah, man, that's kind of messed up.
Yeah. So,
Jeff, you just got Adolph Reed's newest book. It's a good read. I finished it a while ago. I just started Cedric Johnson's new book. I have too many books I got to read, man. I got a lot of books. I got a lot of books here. Physical books and Kindle.
And rereading for the show that kind of helped me keep my train of thought and also goes in line with the show that did really well for us, which was Saturday. See, the shows do better when I'm not here. Anton,
that show Saturday. Actually, I wish you were there, man, because I think you would enjoy that show.
It was actually right up my alley, but I had to go see the boy and someone else. So
Anton Yeager, man, that cat, I really like that young man. I really want him to come back.
In line with Anton's work is a great book that's out now called The End of History by the Alpha Bunga Bunga guys. They also have a really good podcast. They came on the show a few months ago and talked about that book. And I actually went back and reread a lot of it because it really gets in the weeds on this time of anti-politics. So definitely check that out if you haven't already. And go watch that episode if you haven't already. I believe it's just called The End of History with Alex Hockley from Hakuli.
We got a couple of cool guests coming on still this month. For those,
we have a great show Saturday. We're going to have Esperanza Fonseca and Qualia Redux, and we're going to talk about what's going on in Texas with abortion and trans rights, and also we're going to talk about a lot of the activism work that Esperanza is doing with her organization. Affirm.
GG, we got Cedric coming on March 29th to talk about his new book. And for those who don't know, we were able to secure Corey Robin, the political scientist, to come on to talk about his work on the reactionary right.
That is in 2 weeks.
That's in 2 weeks. We are still trying to get our brother Jeremiah to do the house music show. I think he proposed a March date that we got to pull in the calendar. I'm looking forward to that.
That's just so we got some good stuff coming up. And another thing we have coming up is we're actually going to start having a weekly calendar that we're going to post via our social media that will let you know all the shows that are coming up for the month and the movie nights, because now we can plan them a little further in advance for the patrons. So on that note, thank you guys so much for watching. Definitely from the bottom of my heart, we really appreciate you guys. If I haven't said it in the last few weeks, Pascal, I appreciate you as a co-host. This show would not be where it is right now, without you and your input.
I appreciate that, brother. You created something that had a great foundation. I recognize before I even came on the show, before even Torre was on the show, the first episode I heard of the show was Cedric Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, how come I've never heard of this podcast before? This show is great. This guy's Jason is good. And I remember early on liking This Is Revolution, but I was like, all right, this dude's kind of small or whatnot. But I remember saying, okay, Cedric, because I always followed Cedric's appearances. And then when Torre had mentioned, sounds like it was so many years ago, that I know this guy Jason from This Is Revolution. I was like, oh yeah, no, I know that podcast. I listened to that guy's show, man. He's pretty good. I liked what I heard. And he was like, yo, man, you should try it, because Jason Torre had known for years. People had told me that I need to start my own podcast. So you need to start your own podcast. And I was like, I'm not a big into the technical stuff. And I'll be very honest with you. You know what turned me off from doing my own podcast was the rise of some of these YouTube people. And I was like, I don't want to be associated with these type of people. I don't want to be ADOS. I don't want to be FBA. I don't want my black politics associated with that crap. And I felt like, I think I had a conversation with Jared Ball about that. He was like, yeah, it's really kind of, because there were no real good black left YouTubers at that time. And I was like, nah, I don't want to go in that space with those people, man. This stuff is, and I really didn't know the viability of audio only. So I was debating. I was talking to Torre's cousin. I was like, should I do audio? Should I do video? How will I do? And he was like, yo, man, talk to Jason and see what's up. And I was like, all right, let's make it happen. And then boom.
And the next thing you know, he's yelling at Charlemagne the God. So, and that'll be how we make it, when Charlemagne the God has to acknowledge that we called out his attempt to be the voice of Black America. So
people still like that episode.
It's a good episode. We've done some fun stuff. But on that note, because I got to try to call this boy before he goes night night. And it's night time for young Phoenix Joaquin.
Phoenix, I actually miss seeing Phoenix.
You and me both.
Not as much as you do, though.
So, thank you guys so much, and we are out.